we have completely changed the way that we draft in Dynasty startup drafts. Like, I'm telling you, like, it's changed completely this offseason. We're going to highlight exactly what we changed, why we did that, why we think it's way better for you to draft this way in your Dynasty drafts, and how it could help you in the future. Not that if you drafted our other way that you're in a bad shape, because we have plenty of teams we're in fine shape in, but we have really, like Dynasty, we look at it a lot differently this offseason than we have just because of the market. So make sure if you play Dynasty, drop a like, make sure you subscribe. Let's get into this. I want to help you guys with your Dynasty startups today. In terms of this year, like this is going to be very, very specific 2025 advice. Sometimes we'll get on here and we'll do Dynasty startup videos and we'll be like, okay, here are general rules that apply to every Dynasty startup till the end of the time. Like take the value, don't trade up, all that stuff. Yes, all of that still applies. You can find that in any of our other startup videos from before. This is specific to right now because right now it is very easy to screw this up. And we know it is because we've had, 14 live Dynasty community leagues on our channel. Real money leagues hosted by people in our community that we've live streamed. So we've not only looked at those, but Nathan and I have also both done 2 startups this offseason. That's really all we can do, including this one that we're going to talk about here a little bit, the Krusty Krab 2, right next to the original because money, as Mr. Krabs said. But we're going to talk about these specific drafts. Let's talk about draft position this year. A lot of people, we get this question all the time. Hey, what's the best place to draft from in a Dynasty startup? Here's how I broke it down. 1 through 3 are our least favorite spots, and you're going to get the full rundown on why. I hate drafting up top, and every time I draft in the top 3, I hate my team. I hate it. 4 through 9 are better, but it's a mixed bag based on who you actually get falling to you in the middle rounds. It can be good. We've seen very good teams at 4. We've seen very good teams at 9. We've seen very good teams in between. But if you end up on the wrong side of tier drops, depending on positionally how players end up going in the draft, you could, it's kind of a wild card. But then this is the important part, 10 through 12, and we're going to tell you exactly why positionally. 10 through 12 are the cream of the crop in these drafts, especially third-round reversal leagues. 10 through 12 is a cheat code, like imbalanced to a point. And we're going to, again, I'll tell you exactly why in the third-round reversal leagues. But
different than previous seasons.
Let's look at our early round strategy for 2025 and kind of how Nathan and I have approached this so far as we've done some of these drafts.
Yeah, so we've got early round strategy. This is really where you kind of make or break really your 3-year outlook and starting out your Dynasty League. I think that it's really important to understand that with the value of wide receivers going up so much and them being a dime a dozen, it still is worth taking wide receivers in the early rounds. In fact, I think it's worth prioritizing them in the early rounds. If you can go wide receiver start, I'm totally cool with that. If you go wide receiver QB start, QB wide receiver start, I'm totally cool with that because you basically leave the first couple of rounds with one of those top 12 cornerstone wide receivers. What we've found when we review a lot of teams and blueprints is if a team that is contending does not have a top 12 to 15 cornerstone wide receiver, the number one thing that we're telling them to do and the number one moves that we're recommending they make are all for the purpose of them getting a top 15 cornerstone wide receiver. If you don't have one of those guys and you're trying to get through your season with DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, and Tyreek Hill and DK Metcalf, like that's a fine wide receiver room production-wise. You are big time risk of really not maintaining your overall value at your roster. And when you lock down one of those cornerstone guys up top, these guys are just as insulated as the quarterbacks going there. So I think that's really going to be one of the top recommendations we have here. We don't love seeing people take tight end. I love Bowers. I love Trey McBride as individual fantasy talents and dynasty assets. The team's outlook when they go with Bowers or Trey McBride fresh out of a startup is just it's just less than ideal.
Let's look at the example here.
And yeah, when we're looking at teams here in the Krusty Krab 2 that we did, you're seeing the guy Basher 1011 shout out goes with Bowers at the 1.7, which again value wise is not a bad pick. It's like you can take Bowers there, that's totally fine. He's going to maintain his value. But look at the rest of the team here. You've got Herbert and Love as your QBs. Your running back 1 is Barkley. You don't go running back for the rest of the draft until Swift, Najee Warren, etc. And then this is your wide receiver room. Exactly what I'm talking about. Devonta Smith, Terry McLaurin, Jerry Jeudy, and Jalen Waddle. The number one recommendation for this team, if we were to do a blueprint for this team, is move off of Bowers down tier to literally like Laporta, at the highest would be the highest tight end you want to down tier 2, or you just move off of Bowers entirely for what? A cornerstone wide receiver. Yeah. Because that's where your biggest shortcoming is going to be. Your best wide receiver in this room is a wide receiver 2. It's Devonta Smith. So keep that in mind with tight ends. You definitely sacrifice a lot of value upside opportunity and just overall insulation at the wide receiver position, specifically when you're going tight end in those early rounds. And then if you take a running back in the first 3 rounds, you really needed to take 2 other wide receivers. When you take a running back, when you take Genty, Gibbs, or Bijan in the first or second round, which we've seen plenty of drafts where that happens and we're totally cool with it, you just have to make sure that the other 2 picks are going to be wide receivers. You are sacrificing high-end quarterback production upside. You're sacrificing Lamar Jackson when you take an Omarion Hampton at the tail end of the second or early third. You're sacrificing a Drake May when you're taking Bijan in the first round. You don't want to be taking Drake May. You want to be locking down probably a BTJ there and then getting another wide receiver on the wrap in the third round. So just make sure, again, I think the star of the show at this point, which has definitely switched from previous years, from quarterback to now wide receiver in the early rounds. Wide receiver is the star of the show. This is quite literally the golden age of wide receivers, not just in Dynasty and fantasy, but the NFL. I mean, you're seeing these contracts come through as well. They're becoming the second highest paid position in the NFL. This is the modern day NFL. It is built with wide receivers. It's built with an elite passing game. And if you don't have an elite passing game with elite options, you're not making a deep run and you're not winning a Super Bowl. Yeah. And that's just the fact of the matter, which makes what? It makes wide receivers wildly insulated, insanely insulated, which is also why, just a little strategy note outside of this too with startups, this is why we're also, this is why we're not recommending that you down tier from some of those top wide receiver assets as much as we have in the past as well, because it's so hard to get back up to that level when you let go of one of those guys.
So Nathan kind of led into it there, but the new domain draft strategy, while it used to be, we really like dual elite QB builds. Now we like wide receiver factory builds all the way. Our strategy now is centered, and your strategy in startup draft should be centered around the wide receiver position for these reasons. And he kind of alluded to this. Wide receivers are far and away the easiest position to trade away. And liquidity matters. When you're drafting in a startup, liquidity matters because everybody is starting from this point, right? When you look at the My Teams analyzers on Flock, we can get a screenshot up of somebody who just came out of a startup. We always know which reviews when we're doing blueprints. We always know which ones are straight out of a startup because it's very even all the way across the board. Just a tiny little stair step all the way down. Everybody is starting from pretty much the same point from a value perspective. And so liquidity is important because it's the only way you're going to build a dynasty team that is head and shoulders value-wise above your league mates. And so getting a position, a drafting position that's easy to trade away is super important. They hold their value as well as any position. They hold their value better than quarterbacks. They do. I mean, you CJ Stroud, for example. CJ Stroud was, as insulated quarterback, top 3 quarterback, and he goes from the top 3 down to the third round. Justin Fields was being drafted in the first round. They went for the 11th next year.
Mahomes, who was supposed to be the safest asset in Dynasty, drops to the middle of the second round because he has not produced as a high-end quarterback one. So, and the other thing with wide receivers and why our strategy has shifted more towards that is because now you have a large percentage of people playing Dynasty playing in full point PPR leagues, which means from a production standpoint, there's also an advantage to having high target options like a Malik Neighbors, like a Jamar Chase, right? But even going down, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, like a Jackson Smith-Njigba or Ladd McConkey. There's a huge advantage from a scoring standpoint. And so when you're looking all across the board, every facet of Dynasty is pointing towards the wide receiver position being the most valuable now. One thing with that too, just thinking realistically here, like with normal, standard league formats and starting lineups, how many of each position do you have to start? 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 1 tight end,
3 wide receivers.
3 wide receivers, and that's before you get to your flex spots.
And there's more wide receivers.
Exactly.
So, admittedly.
And that's why they're always going to be in demand, is because everyone they constantly want wide receivers because they're the easiest, they're the most achievable, because people they're able to move off of them more than they are the high-end running backs, and then it gives you a lot more flexibility.
So going off of that, really the number one key, in my opinion, the number one strategy point to having a successful Dynasty startup draft right now in Dynasty is working around the drop-offs in wide receiver value. And there are multiple drop-offs here that we need to talk about. Let's talk about the wide receiver tiers. There is a big drop-off after Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Obviously, there are tiers that separate, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson from Amon-Ra St. Brown and BTJ. But in terms of getting an elite wide receiver, you're talking about all those guys, all those top 7 guys are gone before the 2-4 typically. And so you're typically only going to get one of those guys. If you're drafting at the turn, you're not going to get a Jefferson Chase. So you're going to have to get an Amon-Ra. But again, there is a huge drop-off in the early second round and afterwards in elite wide receiver value. Because then you go from the bona fide elite guys to your really, really good, really high upside guys. But it's not, like you need to worry because you've got Drake London, you've got Nico Collins, you've got JSN, Ladd, Travis Hunter, all going there in the mid-second to mid-third range. There's a whole nother round of wide receiver values that you feel good about that you can build your Dynasty team around. But then there is another pretty big tier drop-off after JSN, Ladd, Hunter. Then you kind of get into that next tier guys where there's some uncertainty or maybe they have some lower production issues or things like that, injury issues. But you get into the tier of guys, Tat McMillan, and then you get into T. Higgins, Rashee Rice, Rome Odunze, and this is it. This is how you win. You want to win a Dynasty startup? You need to know where the Higgins, Rice, Odunze drop-off is because it is the number one. It's so simple, but it will absolutely make or break your Dynasty draft. Make or break. Mark my words. Because here's something very practical for you. You can take into your startups when you're doing them. Before the tier drop in the early 4th round, which is, again, that Higgins, Rice, Odunze, Odunze is the last guy to go, and he goes somewhere early to mid-4th. Sometimes Odunze will creep into the 5th, late 4th, early 5th, but rarely do we see that.
Yep.
Before that tier drop, you need at least 2 wide receivers, if not 3 of them, to have a very, very good Dynasty startup draft, to have enough liquidity, to have enough value insulation, production upside, flex spot upside. So you're talking about, of your top 4 picks, at least 2 of them should be receiver, if not 3. The best builds I have seen, including in this draft, are the ones with 3. Nathan probably had the best draft of anybody, him and Blue. Nathan drafted Chase, London, JSN, and then went Baker, Penix. And yes, everybody's going to say, and we'll get to quarterbacks, I know the issue with not going elite QB up top, which is why I went Neighbors, Caleb Williams, Garrett Wilson, and then T. Higgins. So mine's a little bit more of a balanced approach, whereas, Blue went CD Lamb, Amon-Ra, A.J. Brown, which is an elite start, by the way, and then went quarterback. I drafted quarterback in the 2nd. I wanted an elite quarterback in Caleb Williams, but I've got, as my starting wide receivers, Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, and T. Higgins. Yep. So I got 3 wide receivers before the drop-off. Nathan got 3 wide receivers before the drop-off. Blue got 3 wide receivers before the drop-off. I think those are the only 3 of us that did that. And honestly, I think those were probably the 3 best drafts. I'm just looking at this. I really do. Yeah. And yes, I'm partial because Nathan and I know our strategy and we played to our strategy. And so obviously that's a biased take and I know that. And it's not like we're out here dominating every league, but I am saying it's an example of what we're looking for, right? This is an example of what we think. And honestly, if you want to take the bias out of it, I think Blue had a really good draft here. And he played to this strategy, our strategy that we're going to outline here, almost exactly. But anyways, the wide receivers, that teardrop is crucial. 2, if not 3 wide receivers before that Higgins, Rice, Odunze teardrop. It could make or break your draft. And I want to talk about the flip side of this too. And we can kind of have a discussion about this because we move pretty sharply away from dual elite QB.
Yeah, and we can absolutely break this down because I'm sure a lot of you have plenty of questions about this because we've been the QB guys for a very long time. And I will say, just because we're telling you not to go dual elite QB up top doesn't mean we're anti-quarterback in Dynasty Fantasy Football and Superflex leagues right now. We still very much like quarterbacks. The difference is the quarterbacks that you're getting in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, even 6th round is way better than a couple of years ago. Because what happened to the value of quarterbacks from last year to this offseason? There was a ton of disbursement. There were a ton of guys. You remember those startup drafts in Superflex leagues last year. 10 of the 12 picks in the 1st round were quarterbacks. Now there's only 4. So where did those guys go? They all had to go down. They all had to fall and settle at some point. So look, with dual elite QB, the production upside fall off from the guys that you're getting up top, with the exception of the rushing upside guys, with the exception of Lamar Daniels and Herbert, or Lamar Daniels and Allen,
Right.
Herbert.
Rip.
Look, with the exception of those guys, the production upside difference between Patrick Mahomes, who we love in the second round, versus Baker Mayfield in the fourth round is not that significant. Justin Herbert going in the second round versus Dak Prescott going in the fifth round is there's not that much of a difference. In fact, you're getting some guys at a cheaper price just because of their more volatile situations who have higher production upside than some of the people that are going in the second round.
And people will make this point, and they're correct in saying that the difference there between a Baker Mayfield, Michael Penix versus a Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert is their value insulation. And to that, I would say I agree with that. However, you sure about that? Because last time I checked, Trevor Lawrence was once a second-round pick, and he's a fifth-round pick. Last time I checked, Dak Prescott was once a second-round pick. He's now a fifth-round pick. Last time I checked, Kyler Murray was in the second round. He dropped to the fourth. Last time I checked, Justin Fields was in the first. Where's he at right now? Last time I checked, where's C.J. Stroud at compared to where he was last year? They're definitely not, like, foolproof staying up top. Quarterbacks will fluctuate. Young quarterbacks in their value, once they've reached that elite dynasty status, fluctuate more than elite wide receivers do. They do.
3 years ago, the cream of the crop, the top guys that were getting all of these massive contracts. It was the first time we'd ever seen it. Half of the league has that contract. Half of the league. And then the other guys have a step down and they're still getting paid $45 million a year. Guys, contract insulation does not matter anymore for quarterbacks. Who's producing and who's not? Because at this point, the insulation that you're looking for in quarterbacks, 2/3 of the league has it. Kyler Murray is not producing the way that we wanted him to, and he's locked in Arizona for the next 3 years. It doesn't matter anymore. It really doesn't. So you can make the rookies are... Guys that are on rookie deals are a different conversation, a different situation, because like Anthony Richardson, the reason he drastically fell, yes, I understand that. Not as insulated. Caleb Williams, technically, Caleb Williams, we like him a lot. He's really not that insulated because he doesn't have a contract like these other guys do. He has a draft capital investment, the situation, all that. You get what I'm saying. But look, when you're looking at a guy like Herbert who has $250 million in the bank, so does Dak, and they're going 3 rounds apart. So that argument has that ship has sailed with that argument. We're really getting to a point where if all of these guys have all the same deals or roughly the same amount of investment, then you really do care the most. You should be caring the most about production. And I think that really is the disconnect right now in Dynasty, and we haven't quite gotten there yet, because if we had, Baker Mayfield and Brock Purdy would be drafted higher right now. Baker Mayfield would be a second-round dynasty pick right now if we really had accepted that fact.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, people are going to say, well, Nathan, the difference between Justin Herbert and Dak is Justin Herbert's X amount of years younger. And this is where our theory all kind of ties together.
3-year outlooks.
Because people are still trying, if we're playing in 8-year windows here,
you're correct.
Then Herbert is absolutely way ahead of Dak. But if you're playing in 3-year windows, Dak and Herbert, in terms of from a production standpoint in Dynasty for the next 3 years, that's pretty close, actually. I don't know about you guys. I think that's pretty close. And so from a value standpoint, we talked about liquidity with quarterbacks. Elite quarterbacks are far and away, in my opinion, the hardest assets to move in Dynasty, because you are rarely getting what they're actually worth, period, anymore. I rarely see, like, getting people to pay from a startup draft standpoint what an elite QB is worth. I don't see it happening.
No,
in domain leagues, it doesn't happen anymore.
This isn't us just talking out of our butts too. Like, I'm practicing what I'm preaching with this move, and I'm in a hard rebuild where I have 3 quarterbacks. I have Burrow, Herbert, and Purdy.
Which seemed like a good idea at the time.
It seemed like a good idea because I was like, worst case scenario, I can move one of those guys, no problem. I couldn't. I had to make a lateral move. I moved Burrow for CD plus a very minimal premium on top, just to have the flexibility as a hard rebuild of moving CD Lamb as a wide receiver, then Burrow, because no one was interested in Burrow.
People don't buy elite QB,
but they'll pay up for CD.
And so because that is true, this is where, like, what I was saying earlier is going to tie in. Because that's true, and you're not getting what they're worth anymore, and their going prices decrease pretty rapidly. The elite QBs at the top of these drafts, because elite wide receivers are going for almost the same price and they're way easier to sell, I think there is very little value gap between the top of the drafts in Jackson, Hurts, and Allen, and the late first in guys like Neighbors, Puka, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brock Bowers. I think all of those guys are going for about the same price right now, which is why, let me tie it in, which is why the guys at the end are at such an advantage, because you get 2 of those guys. Whereas before, when quarterbacks were actually like way, way, way valued higher, those guys at the front got a pretty big advantage in the value of a quarterback. But because the value gap is gone now in a lot of leagues, and every league is different, by the way, but this is the majority of leagues we see, because that value gap is gone, the people at the end are getting 2 guys, and then there's a huge drop-off before it gets back to the guys at the beginning, which is why third-round reversal, I think, is less practical than it was, because those guys at the end, right now, in my opinion, are at a huge advantage.
But the reason they're at a huge advantage is because people haven't adjusted, and I'm telling you guys, look at me in the camera. This advantage is not going to last for another year. We are 1 more year of extreme quarterback volatility away from Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb being 3 of the top 5 picks in dynasty drafts.
We did that once, by the way.
Your advantage on the turn, your advantage on the 1-2 turn heading into next offseason will be gone.
And we did that with running backs, by the way. Back in the day, I mean, back in the Ice Age, running backs were drafted at the top of dynasty drafts.
And then people realized the volatility. And you don't really have that volatility as much with wide receivers.
People went to quarterbacks.
So
it's going to go to wide receivers.
The community is going to adjust, and it was not this offseason. It will be next offseason.
Wow. We just made a very groundbreaking prediction.
Yeah,
it's going to happen though. Well, he's absolutely right, and so
that's the reason we've seen a huge difference with third round reversal. Is the market has not adjusted.
I know
it will adjust next off season, and then it'll be fair again.
Maybe we should do our next off season startups this off season instead. And then we'll get the number 1 pick. But you know, again, I think when talking about quarterbacks, I don't want to diminish the value and the value inflation of quarterbacks. By the way. They're very valuable. If you have a team with plenty of wide receiver depth and you can have 2 elite QBs, by all freaking means have the 2 elite QBs, because from a value standpoint and a production standpoint, they do give you an advantage. But out of a startup, straight out of an even startup, typically nobody has an elite team, and that's why we need to be careful of that. Let's talk about running backs. So in running backs,
this is the golden age of running back value right now, dude. I'm just telling you.
You're getting all of these running backs right now in the 4th to 7th round.
Yeah.
And so when let's look at the guys going in that range. And this is where I took running back. So my 2 running backs on this team that I took to be my starting running backs, Kyron Williams and Caleb Johnson. Both guys I think that have running back on 1 upside or high-end running back 2 upside, one of the 2. Both of them I got in the 5th and 6th round. I was able to, again, start with those wide receivers and then get my running backs later. Nathan did the same thing. Nathan only grabbed 1 running back because he had to take Colston Loveland because he was such a good value in the 7th round. But he took R.J. Harvey at the 6'9", which is a nice
That's
pick.
a nice pick.
That's nice. Let's look at some of the other teams. I talked about Blues team. He got Lamb, Amon-Ra, and A.J. Brown. He got 2 quarterbacks in Kyler and J.J. McCarthy. And then he got Josh Jacobs and Chuba Hubbard, 2 running back 1s last year in the 6th and 7th round. And then James Conner, another running back 1 in the 10th. That's how you build a dynasty team.
Facts.
That's how you draft right there. Echo did this well too. Echo was another one of those guys that actually did pretty well up top because he got Nico Collins, Travis Hunter, but he also got Stroud Mahomes. But then in the middle rounds here, 6th and 7th round, he went Chase Brown, Kenneth Walker. I mean, that's awesome. You're taking advantage of these middle rounds because these middle rounds are absolute freaking gold mines for running back value. Because the wide receiver market, like I said, when the wide receiver market dries up, where does the value shift? The value goes to running backs. And people, including you, should be clamoring to take those wide receivers in the first 3 or 4 rounds. After that, it's running back time, baby. Running backs in this range, Kyron Williams, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins are both going in the 4th right now. JT, Brees, Josh Jacobs, Caleb Johnson, they all have running back 1 upside or have produced as running back 1s, and you're getting them significantly cheaper. It's all about where you place your value, right? You can grab plenty of running backs in this later range and have plenty of scoring upside from a production standpoint, but from a value standpoint, you don't have to sacrifice, because the opportunity cost of picking a top running back is monumental. And I have it listed here if you want to go through these teams. The teams that picked Bijan, Genty, and Gibbs, look at their wide receiver rooms and tell me that the opportunity cost was not ginormous for these teams. I mean, there is no wide receiver rooms here. There's not.
Yeah. So with the guy who took B-Rob, Tanner, this is David.
Yep.
He got Ladd, Mike Evans, and Josh Downs as a wide receiver room. Ladd's great. Evans and Downs is a little shaky.
That is Tanner. My bad. It's Tanner.
It is Tanner.
Yep.
Tanner went very, very heavy at running back in this draft. Not only did he go with Bijan, but he just went JT, James Cook, and so definitely a lot of risk here. And then he took Warren in the 6th, so he went tight end. wide receiver took a big hit here. Then you've got the team that went with Gibbs, which was David. He got Gibbs and CMC. His wide receiver room is DJ Moore, Tyreek Hill, and Jawan Jennings. This is an RB heavy team. Gibbs, Henry, CMC, Kamara. I mean, if you're not a top contender this year, then you're going to be looking at a hard rebuild. If you're not going for a run, then that means your guys didn't work out, and then you're kind of in a world of hurt heading into next offseason. The guy that went with Genty in this draft was Sunraker actually, and he had Genty, Judkins, Mixon. His wide receiver room is DK, Ayuk, Reed, Debo, Ridley, Cooper Kupp, which again, all of those receivers as individual assets are solid. You can make good arguments for all of them.
But these are 3s and 4s out of 10. All of them. Every single one of them.
Right.
It's not good enough.
And
How often
DK as a number 1 is not ideal. DK as a number 3 or 4 is very ideal.
Exactly right.
So just you're sacrificing that. And he went with Lamar and Genty as his top 2 picks.
And talk about our tight end strategy. You and I both typically, unless there's crazy value, punt.
Yeah. So like for me in my situation, I was kind of in a pickle in this draft. Like I went with Loveland in the 7th round. Loveland was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. You cannot let him fall past the 6th round, guys. At the 7-4, that's just stupid. It's just stupid. There's too much. I know in the past there have been guys that didn't work out with that draft capital. I'm not even saying that Loveland's going to work out. Top 10 draft capital. Jeez Louise. I mean, if this guy ends up being the number 2 target in that offense, that's the biggest value one in the draft. Mark Andrews, I had to take him in the 11th round. I ended up with 2 tight ends. Not an ideal strategy that I recommend for a lot of people, but again, take the value that falls, maybe have a little flexibility later on in the draft. In normal circumstances, guys, we're just recommending that you punt tight end in startup drafts. I understand that you need a serviceable tight end. You can fade tight end, but you still need a serviceable tight end heading into the season when you're a contender. I get it. I really, really do. You can get better value through trades than you can in a startup draft at the tight end position. Bowers, McBride are awesome picks, especially in the 2nd and 3rd round, respectively. You're not getting them in the 2nd and 3rd right now. Bowers and McBride are going in the 1st and 2nd round, respectively, and that's just too high right now. Major tight end premium bonuses do need to be taken into account, so keep that in mind. If you're in a full point tight end premium league or 1.5, 2-point tight end premium league, I take those guys up top. I'm totally okay with it. The number of starting tight ends, I've seen a number of 2 tight end starters. You really would like to have McBride or Bowers on one of those in those formats because that's a massive advantage over your league. Most of the time, though, these tight ends are really going too early, the top options. Our favorite tight ends to target right now are Laporta, Hawk, and Kittle. Laporta, because he's going at a fraction of the price that he was last season. Loveland, who I got in the 7th round. Hawkinson also going in that range. And then Kittle, who's just one of the most productive tight ends at a ridiculously low price right now, just because he's 30 years old. Tight end, remember, keep this in mind, guys. We say this all the time. The reason we do not recommend that you go heavily invest in a tight end up top is because it's a luxury item. How many tight ends are you required to start every single week? 1. In a super flex league, guys, that is the only position where you only have to start 1 every single week. I guess QB, you only have to start 1, but like you really want to be starting 2 in a super flex league. Our favorite tight ends to draft in startups, keep those guys in mind. Kittle, Loveland, Hawkinson. Book them, make a note. If you're going into a startup, those are going to be the best values that you're going to get in a startup draft. If you are going to get an elite tight end, otherwise fade the position entirely.
And then real quick, past round 10, here's kind of our strategy once we get to like the no man's land of Dynasty. Like grab rookies, especially rookie running backs, because they're going to have good shots of being in committees. Grab veterans, the ones people hate for no reason. Like grab a Michael Pittman there. Grab a Jacoby Myers down there. Those type of guys could help you and could be a flex. But grab Jawan Jennings. He's a great pick past the 10th round. Grab any backup running back that could end up seeing the field or is 1 injury away. Wide receivers, there's always 3 or 4 wide receivers ready to go. With running backs, typically that backup running back is going to be the guy there. And then grab tight end. If you punt tight end, you can still get. I punted tight end in this draft, and I ended up later in this draft getting Tucker Kraft in the 12th, Mason Taylor in the 13th, and Travis Kelce in the 15th. And honestly, I'll start one of those guys this year. I don't really even care. But guys like Kelce, Kraft, and Mark Andrews are all gettable past the 10th round. And if you do punt tight end, you can get one of those guys. And so, again, our strategy has changed, but the 2 boys behind the camera have only done one thing, and that's gotten older, and one of us has gotten slightly fatter. Eventually, I don't think Nathan will ever get fat. So But hopefully that makes sense. If you have any thoughts, let us know in the comments. Make sure you drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and if you enjoyed the Dynasty content. And go to flockfantasy.com/domain. We can help you with your startup draft, get you a team blueprint after your startup. All of that included with our rankings, trade calculator, our Discord, everything. Link's going to be in the comment. But we appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching today, and we'll see you later.